Yeah.
What one piece of advice would you give your younger self when you first started out?
Uh, the piece of advice that I would give my younger self would be to do a degree apprenticeship.
Hmm.
Um, that was a facility that wasn't around when I was beginning my career or making the choice to go to university.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, apprenticeships were around, just to be clear, but it was to go into specific trades.
Hmm.
There was never the opportunity to, for example, if I want to work as a QS professionally, which means as a client advisor, there was never the route to go into an apprenticeship to facilitate me doing that role as a career.
Hmm.
I would have to go into an apprenticeship, which meant either being a bricklayer, a joiner, or a painter and